Hey, Mark, what are we drinking today?
That's a great question, Dan. I'll tell you what we're going to drink. We're going to drink some whiskey that took a detour before it got to us.
Yeah.
We're going to drink whiskey that spent its time in its barrel and then spent some time in another barrel, but not finishing.
Double oak.
Double oak, which I suppose is kind of like finishing. It's something that happens after.
Right.
We would probably properly refer to that as a second maturation.
I didn't even hit my first maturation yet.
Well, I'm hoping we get there.
Yeah.
And so not involving wine barrels or port barrels or
Right.
sherry barrels, but involving other barrels that typically are new barrels. They're toasted or charred or a combination. And it's been some time in there. And toasted's a big thing now. That's part of that second maturation thing. Everybody's got a toasted expression. I've had some of the Michter's toasted is all right. But, Michter's toast all their barrels.
What's the difference between charring and toasting?
Charring is lots of heat for a very short period of time. So it burns the barrel. Barrel's on fire.
Right.
It's very dramatic. It chars that initial depth in the barrel, and that's what, we love about a charred oak barrel. Toasting is lower heat for a longer period of time, hopefully to bring out different compounds, more of the vanillin, the vanilla type stuff. And a lot of brands, in fact, one of our favorites, Lenny toasts and chars all of his barrels.
Yeah. Lenny's not a brand.
That's right. Deer Hammer. Excuse me.
Lenny's a human being that runs.
He's so intertwined in my mind with Deer Hammer that he is it is him.
Right.
But anyway, correct. Deer Hammer. So, Lenny toasts all his barrels. So they're not necessarily second maturation, but even his first barrels. And Michter's does the same thing. And so a lot of brands do.
Yeah.
I think Michter's really kicked off the toasted part of that. But a lot of brands have done a second barreling. Woodford's the most well-known, the double oak.
Double oak, yeah.
And frankly, it's really hit and miss. And I think that one of the things that we complain about with traditional finishing, let's mature it in a regular barrel, let's put it in a rum barrel for a while, is that often that seems like it's an escape hatch for less than wonderful whiskey. I think sometimes that happens with the doubled oak thing. But it's just really hit and miss. But lately we've stumbled into a couple of really good ones.
You did.
And now we're kind of back on that. Well, let's try that out a little bit more.
Because we were initially somewhat scarred by our first experience.
Yeah, the first time we had a Woodford double oak, it was awful.
Yeah.
It was like a store pick single barrel.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Yes. That kind of was to me the beginning of a very negative connotation when I saw double oak on anything.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to me that when I saw Peerless has a double oak, I saw it on the shelf. I passed it up like 3 different times and I was like, nah, I just can't make the bite, but I love Peerless stuff. They've done really great stuff. I thought, man, if Peerless has done a good bourbon and a good rye, there's got to be something here. So I want to try it. And it was not cheap. That was a $90 bottle. But I took the plunge. I bought it and we tasted it. Delicious. And I actually had some last night just to make sure. Still delicious. Yeah.
And we opened the Wild Turkey Master's Keep 1. And that's an 8 to 14-year-old batch of barrels that then goes back into a new that's been toasted and all that. It's amazing.
Right.
So maybe the secret, and we kind of talked about it, maybe the trick is if it's good whiskey before it goes in that second barrel, there's good things to be added. After, if it's weak going in,
it's going to be weak coming out.
it seems as if it gets I haven't bought a second bottle, but when Elijah Craig first had their toasted, I bought it. And the first sip I thought, well, that's pretty good. It's a little different than normal. Every sip after that tasted like sweaty socks and a wet cardboard. It was just nasty. And it was almost as not as bad as that Woodford, but it was close.
Yeah, sure.
And then one I go back and forth on is Old Forester 1910. And that's one of those with the great story. And when they go to the second barrel, they go to a barrel that's just about charred to death. It's a long char. So it spends whatever time. And of course, Old Forester never age states that stuff, probably 4 or 5 years. And then it goes into this super charred barrel. And the story of that was it was the fire on Whiskey Row in 1910. I go back and forth on that one. Sometimes I feel like it's marshmallows and chocolate because of that super charred barrel. And sometimes it just tastes like, last night I sat out by a fire drinking whiskey. It sometimes just tastes like that. I'm just, my head's in a fire.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, Old Forester, the bottles are very different from depending on which one you get. Like the bottled and bond, the bottled and bond versus like the 1920, totally different.
Very different.
Totally different animals. So I wonder how much of that has to do with the char process and how much, or the double oaking or double barreling versus just Old Forester's recipe in general and how it reacts to certain things.
As far as I know, it's all the same recipe, and there's a big proof difference in those. You know, you got 1910s at 93 or 94 proof, the 1897, the bottled and bond's 100, 115 for the 1920. So that's part of it. I'm sure there's different rick houses and the way they batch those barrels together is different, but it is odd. It's a lot like Wild Turkey where there's just that one recipe, but it's very, very different. And of course the 1910 stands out because it's the only one of those that gets that double barrel treatment. But I don't know. It just, it still feels like a cop out in a lot of cases. You know, we don't know what to do with this, so we're just going to put it in a second barrel. So I think that's the best tip so far, which we're going to keep drinking, make sure we get to the bottom of it. Eventually after years. But I think that's the biggest takeaway is if it's a brand that you're on the fence about on a typical expression and they come out with a double barreled or a double oaked or a toasted barrel, it's probably just going to be crap.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't that good in the first place. But if you're a Wild Turkey fan and we know that everything they make is good, and they start talking about, let's put it in a toasted barrel after and leave it for a while, then you got some chance with that. And same with Peerless, the way you said with Peerless, young distillery, relatively young distillate, super high quality. Everything we've had from we've really liked. Pretty good chance we're going to like that. And good thing because that wasn't a cheap bottle.
No, it was not at all. Where do we stand right now on double oaked? I mean, with my limited experience, I mean, I know for a fact that the Peerless double oaked is excellent. Not a fan of the Woodford. You know, what other double oaked expressions have you had?
So the 1910, that Wild Turkey, I had the Michter's toasted bourbon. I had the Elijah Craig toasted. So not that many.
Yeah. We like 50-50 on liked versus disliked.
I think we're about there.
About 50-50.
And the Michter's was fine, but people, that's an $80 bottle. People pay hundreds of dollars for it. That's not.
Yeah. I don't think I would like it. I mean, Michter's to me is okay, but it's not my favorite. Yeah. So to me, I wouldn't take that leap on anything double oaked, you know. And again, I think that goes back to knowing your tastes and what's going into the barrels.
Yeah, and that's what you have to trust is you know what you should know after a while what you like. You got to use that as the basis because this second maturation, this other barrel thing, that's a little unknown unless you've just had a lot of those. And I don't think I've had enough to say. I'm going to stick to it's a crapshoot.
Yeah.
If I'm going to roll those dice, I'm going to roll it on a brand where I like the other whiskey. I'm not going to take a chance on a brand that say for instance, let's try and think of one. Even Heaven Hill, you know, if Heaven Hill comes out with a toasted barrel, second oak, double oaked, whatever bourbon, and it's under 10 years old, I'm going to take that chance.
Right.
If they come out with a barrel proof 12-year-old double, I'm out. I don't like that whiskey going in. I'm probably not going to like it in another barrel.
Let's talk a little bit about the syntax associated with double oak because, you know, the Peerless says double oak right on the label, but it's not always, I mean, the process itself isn't always labeled double oak.
No, it can be toasted barrel. It can be, I don't know. That's probably about it. I've heard. I mean, toasted oak, toasted and double oaked. Yeah, double oaked,
double.
Which we had that. That was a friend got me that at the distillery. It wasn't so bad.
Yeah. I mean, I think again, I think everybody's kind of looking for their angle right now on making themselves stand out and look unique. And so you do have to do your due diligence as a consumer when you see double oak and then you see something else that's toasted, or you see something, matured in a second barrel.
They always, maybe the name's not the best way, but they will always brag about it because it looks as an expense. I mean, the barrel costs money,
right? And
the time costs money, and the rick house costs money. It costs more to do that, so they're always going to call it out. But I don't. It's not magic, and if you like the whiskey going in, maybe there's a chance, but it's just not. I'm not going to pay that much more for that experience,
right?
And I still think, just like I think with finishing techniques with wine barrels and such. I think that part of what's happening is the grain has changed. The homogenized grain across a lot of the country. There's not as much flavor. Rye in particular. There's the starch levels in rye is way higher than it was just a couple of decades ago. Starch is not flavor. Corn, I think, is similar in that it's just not the same flavor in the grain.
Right.
And I think that may be why we're starting to see a lot of these finishing techniques and double oaks and all that is because they're looking for some flavor, because a lot of this younger whiskey, 4 or 5 years old, that grain is different than 10 or 15 years ago.
Does it feel a little bit like brands are kind of grasping at straws? I mean, does it feel a little gimmicky, the finishing and the double oaking and all this?
I think there's some gimmick feel to both of those things. I think that it's easier to call that with the wine type finishes, the port finishes, because used barrels, it's got to be a lower expense, especially because of the conglomerate nature of these. If Elijah Craig wants barrels, if somebody wants used barrels, they've all got used barrels from somewhere. But when you start talking about new barrels, there's a bigger investment in that, right. And I think so. I think for sure it's gimmicky with. I think it's gimmicky with so few of the rum finishes, or even the name finishing. Why was I buying unfinished whiskey before?
This is incomplete.
Yeah, that was. I'm kind of mad now.
You had whisk.
You didn't tell me this was not finished. Now we got to finish it.
Yeah.
And I know it's more like finishing school or whatever, but I do think it's gimmicky. I do think that part of it is they're grasping for not only a marketing angle, but they're grasping for some flavor. I think that the tide that's rising all of these boats, there is massive investment going. Willett just announced a $93 million distillery expansion.
Right.
I'm sure they're all happy that the market's great, but I think they're also looking around and going, holy smoke, this is getting crowded. And they're trying to find that thing that's a little bit different. And fortunately or unfortunately, as American consumers, we like shiny stuff.
Yeah.
So when they flicker a shiny thing in front of us, we all run down and buy a few thousand cases of it.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we always get rewarded for that.
No, but I think on one hand, we do get the ability to taste different things and have basically a scope of products that no generation has had before us.
Yeah.
Which is cool. But it also ups the ante for us in terms of what we spend our dollars on, because taking a risk on a $90 bottle like I did, how many people can do that with any regularity?
Yeah.
And then you just revert back to what which is that $40 bottle you've always liked, right?
Yeah, and that's important because there are brands that are doing really good stuff, and Peerless is a good example of that. But it's dangerous unless you just have all the money in the world. It's a dangerous game we play with these bottles.
Yeah. I just bought a Boulder Spirits cask strength, and I wouldn't have dreamed of doing that even 6 months ago because we do what we do, we've had the opportunity to taste ahead of time. And I think at this point, that's really the only way for a lot of consumers to do this is to listen to other people's takes, and which is a dangerous game in itself.
Yeah, there's that. And then there's, we aren't, at least I'm not a big, let me go to the bar and drink stuff.
Yeah.
Because especially not for the purpose of figuring out if I like something, because there's smells and sounds and things that I'm not used to there. And I don't know that I get a true reading.
Right.
If I had the best palate in the world, which I'm, so far from that, it doesn't matter, then maybe I could suss that out.
Yeah.
But I've had so many experiences where I got something just because it's fun. I'm not really worried about tasting it. But in that process, I'm like, it doesn't taste anything like I remember.
Right.
Why? Well, because there's a dude smoking out in the alley and there's a steak burning back, and it's just all different. Yeah. But that's the other option. Buying a pour, and a lot of people like us will do not reviews, but they'll have a system of that. Is it a buy? Is it a try, or is it a pour? A drain
pour, yeah.
And so if it hits that middle one, even if it's an expensive pour, $12 or $15, better to pay that than $90 to find out you don't like something.
Right. Well, fortunately for you, Mark, we recently discovered that I'm a super taster. So
we did, which I still don't think that's correct. What I think is
I'm a drama queen.
You're a drama queen.
My wife bought for our last whiskey night last week. My wife bought these tasting strips, and you put them on your tongue, and some people don't taste it at all. Some people taste a little bit of bitterness, and some people are just like blasted with the bitterness, and those are the super tasters. And I felt pretty blasted by the nastiness of it, to the point where I made a funny face, funnier than my normal face. And my wife said, "Oh, you're a super taster," and I'm running with that, man.
He did. He grabbed a hold of that like it was the last lap in the Olympic trials.
Just because I made T-shirts that said I'm a super taster? Come on.
I think the only actual super taster in that group was my wife. Who barely made a sound, but you could see on her face that was the nastiest thing she had in a while. And she swears, she'll go, "I can't taste things like you do." I'm like, "Are you kidding?
Yeah.
You taste everything that I don't taste."
Yeah.
It's but not her thing.
She's probably smarter than all of us, and probably like better at tasting all this stuff, and just as quiet,
She's just quiet.
She's holding out.
And then she'll say, "I don't know why you bought a second bottle of that. It's terrible."
Where were you before?
Would have been nice to know.
Yeah,
I liked it. That's it. Yeah. Well, Dan, it's another one of those things in whiskey where it's a twist plot. It's a wrinkle in the thing.
Yeah,
you got to keep drinking the bottles, but don't just jump in. It's kind of like single barrels. Just because it says single barrel doesn't mean it's better. The person that picked it might not have known what they were doing. Same with this. Just because it's double oaked and somebody spent some time doesn't mean it's any better. It might just be doubly bad.
Right.
And that's what we found. So if you gotta buy the bottle and take the shot, do it with brands that you like other things they do. Because chances are this will improve things. Yes. But if it's a brand that you've had bad experiences with before, that second barrel or that toasting is probably not going to save it any more than dumping it in a Chardonnay barrel and calling it finished is going to help it.
Yep. Well, in just a few minutes, Mark, we're going to be testing this theory because I brought the Peerless Double Oak with me today. And so we're going to taste some of that on Friday Sips Live, which is...
By the time everybody hears this, that will have been done.
Oh, yeah. But then you can go on YouTube and you can find it.
That's right. Go back and watch that. And actually watch the last two Fridays, which will be today will be December 9th. Last week would have been the second.
Yeah.
Watch those because we opened that Peerless on the 2nd. And then today we'll have some of that. We're going to have a Barrel Vantage, which is quite tasty. We're going to open up a 1910, Old Forester 1910, and we're going to sip some of that Wild Turkey Master's Keep 1, which I had a lot more of until about 12 hours ago when some friends and I kind of did some damage to it on the deck out in the cold in the fire last night.
That happens. But you can watch those on YouTube now, and of course, join us every Friday, 2:30 MST. So that's whatever that translates to where you are in the world. We drink and we open bottles and we test stuff and we chat with you. So please do join us live every Friday at 2:30 Mountain Standard Time.
And speaking of drama queens, then one of us drinks the dump glass after on Instagram.
It's always a good time.
Always a good time.
Yeah.
Cheers, Dan.
Cheers, Mark. Let's go do it.
Yep.